I'm Joe Peterson with TM Group, and I am going to show you Solver's budgeting and reporting solution. Solver has been around for quite some time. They've been a Microsoft partner for a long time. They've actually built multiple Excel-based reporting solutions. This is actually their third go-around. They built one, SAP bought it, they built another one, Microsoft bought it, and this is their most recent version, which came out several years ago. So it's a very mature product. It works natively with BC along with many other systems. From a architecture standpoint, it is a cloud-based solution, just like BC. It works natively with Business Central. In fact, it works extremely well with Business Central because it has a solution called Quick Start. And the idea behind Quick Start, and I'm going to show you some of the reports in it, is that literally on day one, from the time that once BC is ready and it has data in there, we then deploy Solver Cloud. And on day one, we're accessing your data and have the ability to generate reports. So it works very well natively with BC as an app. So it's actually an app within BC that can be installed, which gives you your link to Solver Cloud. It is on the Microsoft Azure network, exactly as Business Central is. And the idea behind it is we've got in this section here, Business Central. We can also have legacy ERPs or other systems that you may use, payroll systems or other enterprise-related systems. And Solver can serve as the reporting tool for all of your enterprise systems. If it can get into a database, it can get into Solver. And that happens via the data warehouse. So the concept is we take your BC data, just the data that you need for reporting purposes. Those get loaded into a data warehouse. If you're coming over from GP, there's really no sense in loading all of that legacy historical data into BC because we could use Solver to load all of your historical data into the data warehouse. All your new data comes from BC, and we can commingle that data together for consolidated reporting. Once it's into the data warehouse, there's three basic components of it. We've got reporting, which I'm going to show you first. We've got planning, which is the budgeting portions of it. And then finally, it works natively with Power BI. So the idea is we get the data in from our ERP, we do our financial reporting and budgeting, and then we do our data analytics using a tool like Power BI. All right, so I'm going to just jump right into it. So this is the Solver homepage. As I said, it is cloud-based, so you'll access it via a website, same way that you would with BC. As I mentioned, it's broken into a couple of sections. We've got a reporting section, and this includes several different components, and I'll talk about each of these. We've got planning, which is our budgeting, and that has several different components as well. And then we got the data warehouse. And I'm going to briefly talk about the data warehouse, just so that you understand that it's nothing overly complex that should scare you. It's fairly simplistic, and so I'm going to show you how your data looks in the data warehouse. I'm going to start out with reporting, though. And every report or budget form that I show you was built in Excel. You guys are on Management Reporter or before that FRX, and accounting departments have been pretty lucky in that respect because they've had this financial reporting application. FRX had the tagline written by accountants for accountants, and it was revolutionary because it gave finance departments the ability to create their own reports without bringing IT into the mix. And so that Solver's maintained that same kind of concept that want accountants to be able to generate and analyze their own data. And what tool do we spend our time in? It's Excel. So everything I'm going to show you is actually built in Excel. And I will show it to you both on the web and in Excel so you can kind of see how it looks both ways. We organize our report using categories. So when you see these categories, think in terms of your network drives. You might have a finance folder, and inside of that, you might have monthly financials or whatever. However you organize your current report system, we need to be able to replicate that in the web, and we do that using categories. And these categories are all controlled via security. So I can decide who has access to these categories and what reports they have access to within them. And in addition, it has a full-blown security module, so we can secure really as detailed as you want to be. You can control it by company, by other dimensions, such as department or location. We can even secure things down to the account level. So, for example, if you want people to be able to see financial reports, but maybe you don't want them to see, salaries and benefits or something based on certain user security. And it is all role-based. We have the full ability to control what people see here. People can also create their own organization system in there. So if they have reports that they frequently use, they can create their own structure here so they can organize their own reports. I'm going to start just kind of showing some basic monthly reports. One of the themes in Solver is organization. So we want to organize and streamline the process for your month-end close process, the process for generating financials, and then the process for organizing or analyzing them. And you'll see the same theme with budgeting as well, where we're trying to really organize and streamline that process. You'll see things that they kind of have a flow here. Like, for example, this is just a static Excel sheet called monthly reporting process. These are all the steps that I have to do in order to prepare financial statements. And it's just, what is the activity? What template or report am I running from Solver? Who's doing it and when's it due? Again, it's front and center, because if you're on the web, everybody that you grant access to it would be able to see this process. And then it might be things like a trial balance, for example. So open up a trial balance. Now, this is a report that is a trial balance with variance, so it's not in a standard trial balance format, but you can see that this is Excel look and feel. It's because it is Excel online. And I will open this up, one of these reports up in Excel, so you can see how it looks, kind of on the back end. So standard, trial balance. You can also generate reports for multiple modules too. So natively, when we install Solver, it natively does general ledger reporting. And kind of like GP, it breaks up general ledger into two submodules. So you got general ledger detail and general ledger summary. And the reason why those are split up into separate modules is because summary reports run much faster and the data loads much faster. So we make a distinction between the two, especially based on the volume of your data. But they're essentially one module, just split up for performance purposes. And so out of the box, natively it works with the general ledger module, but we can also use Solver to be reporting for accounts payable or accounts receivable or any other module that you're using in BC. Okay, I'm going to switch over to just some basic financial reports. So the first one I'm going to show is just a basic P&L report. And again, I'm looking at this in the web. And so, again, you have the same look and feel of Excel because this is the web-based version of it. Everything that you can do in Excel, you can do with Solver because everything is built in Excel. You have the ability to do conditional formatting, as you see in this section down here, where we're using conditional formatting to designate positive or good variances versus variances that are of concern. And then you can use standard Excel charting as well. So it's not really designed to replace a true analytics tool like Power BI, but certainly Excel has, lots of graphing capabilities. There's only one function in Excel that you can't use in Excel Online, and it's really a Microsoft limitation, and that is you cannot have workbooks that have macros in it. Microsoft doesn't allow macros in Excel Online due to security concerns, so that is the only Excel functionality that you use when deploying Excel-based reports on Solver. Another thing that you'll see too is that a good feature in Excel is data grouping. So you'll see that we've grouped this data down here in the departmental expense. For example, in the past, like in FRX or in Management Reporter days, we used to create like a summary P&L and then a detailed P&L. But with Excel, we really don't need to do that because of data grouping. And that's just a built-in function into Excel. Here we're looking at these departmental expenses in summary, but we can expand each of these lines and see the details that make it up. So it's a combination of a summary and detail report at the same time. And so this breaks it down by account level. Okay. It has little drill down capabilities as well. If you right mouse click on any of these values, you have the ability to drill into the summary level or into the detail level. So summary level is just like the account summary in GP, where you have the summation of the debits and credits by account by period. And then the detail level takes it all the way down to the journal entry detail. And this can be controlled, this can be turned on and off too. So this is a secureable function at a report level or at a user or role level. You can decide whether people have the ability to drill down or not. Again, a balance sheet is very simplistic look and feel, but in this case, this is a balance sheet that's a little more trending. So it's showing 3 periods. One of the things that I want to do is open this up in Excel or directly in Excel in design mode. Just so you can see that, behind the scenes, there's no wizard behind the scenes. This is all Excel. So all I have to do to open up in Excel is I click on Edit in Report Designer. And Report Designer is essentially Excel. And I'll show you what I mean by Report Designer. So essentially what Report Designer is just an Excel add-in. And you can see up top here, it adds a new ribbon to Excel. And if I look at that ribbon, it's just have some components that are specific to the solver. We can control parameters. Parameters, for example, are on the Run tab. They are the values that the report user can select at runtime when they run a report. Over here to the left, you'll see this is the Report Designer window where we have our modules available to us. And as I said, natively, General Ledger is already pre-configured to work with BC, but we can add in any other modules that you're utilizing. As I mentioned, it breaks it down between summary and detail level, but you can see that it's just one module here. They're just kind of sub-modules, just so that we can control it from a performance standpoint. If I expand General Ledger, I'll see all the various fields that I would use in General Ledger, my dimensions like the account number or the department or location, and it's all just drag and drop. So I just drag fields over, and you'll see that this report, while it's got a lot of data behind it, there's really only a couple of actual report components. So we've got an amount field here for our current assets, an amount for our property and equipment for each of these sections, right? The rest of them are just standard Excel formulas to add these up and display it the way that we want to. So from a design standpoint, your ability to create content for Solver is directly related to your strengths in Excel. So if you are intermediate and above user in Excel, you will find it's very easy to create content. If you're below intermediate level, then you might want some additional Excel training, but it's directly related to your Excel ability. All right, so I'm going to close this, go back to Report Designer. And so we have the basic financials. So we've got a statement of cash flows. This is a great report to create in Solver because oftentimes, depending on the complexity of your statement of cash flows, it can be a little challenging to create it in FRX or Management Reporter. Here, because we're dealing with actual individual fields instead of rows and columns, it makes it a little bit easier to reference other things within the reports. The statement of cash flows is a great example of how much easier it is to create content in Excel as opposed to Management Reporter. Okay, I'm going to switch over to some analytics reports. So we've got our core financial statements. So we got our controlled trial balance, the things that we need to do at the start of the process, and we jump into our financial statements. It's a great tool for analytics. One of the things that you'll find is it's going to open up a lot of possibilities for you to very quickly analyze your data. So for example, this is just a standard P&L, but it's based on variances. And it uses some built-in Excel functionality. So it uses these icons, which is conditional formatting in Excel. And so this is just a fairly simplistic report that it's by company, because we can run this for multiple companies. And in this example, we're actually running it for 3 companies. We're running it for 2021 of September of 2021. We're running this for multiple departments. So you can see that this breaks it up by company, then by department, and then by account. And if I scroll down, I'll start seeing other departments. And if I keep on going, I'll see other companies. And so this is just a long list report, but essentially what it does is it just compares your actual versus budget and gives you a variance. And with the variance percentage, And we're using built-in, Excel tools to use these conditional formatting icons. Yellow means it's fine, green means it's good, and then, red is something that we would want to look at. And so this is a great way to just very quickly go through all of your accounts across all companies, across all departments, and look for things that are, areas of concern that we want to focus on as we're, analyzing our financial statements. And it fully supports, built-in filtering as well. So we can filter on, variances that are above or below a certain amount or above or below a certain percentage. So data filtering works natively as well. Okay. Another thing that I think when you combine reporting with budgeting into a single tool, one of the things that allows us to do is to capture subjective data. So oftentimes a challenge of having budgeted information natively in our ERP like GP or Business Central is we're really forced to just kind of budget at the general ledger level. When we introduce a data warehouse into the mix and combine budgeting and reporting in the same application, it allows us to capture things that don't fit within a general ledger system. For example, comments. Here's an example where I might have an actual versus budget, or in this case, it's just a budget variance percentage. And maybe I want this to go out to department or company or location managers and say, hey, explain the variances that are above or below a certain percentage. And so this allows you to put in comments to explain those variances in a budget form, which then allows us to report it because those comments become fully reportable. It links it with the account number for this period, for this company, for this department. And so at that point, I can produce a report like this that says, give me my variances with those explanations. And that could be part of my financial distribution process. I also mentioned that, it supports data grouping. Just like the P&L that we looked at, we're grouping it from top to bottom so we can see more details at the account level, but we can also group it from left to right in our columns. Here we're looking at year-to-date actual. We hit the expansion buttons and we can see the individual months that make up those actuals. And we can do the same thing on budgeting. So again, that's just native Excel functionality. Okay. Another one is an example getting back to those comments. Here's a comment analysis report where essentially what we're doing is we're just looking at just the accounts that have comments on them. So that gives you a way if you send out a budget form that says explain these variances, now we can run a report that only focuses just on the accounts that have variance comments on them. So I can very quickly look and see what all of those exceptions are and what the rationale is for them. Solver fully supports consolidations. For example, here is you mentioned trees in one of your questions. Solver supports all of the companies of BC that you have, no matter how many you have, will come over as individual companies in the data warehouse. It's a singular data set, so it combines all of the data together and it separates it out using a dimension. I know dimension has come up as a term in BC, which is kind of something that's new that we didn't really have in the GP world. But essentially it's all one data set, but we segregated out into individual companies or departments based on a company dimension. So in this case, we've got a tree for a consolidation report, and we can have all kinds of trees, just like you could in Management Reporter, based on any dimension. So we can create trees based on your entity dimension, which is your company. That would be your BC companies in MEM. So each entity within MEM is a different entity in Solver. But it can also, we can create trees based on anything else. So if you have a department dimension or location dimension, we can make trees out of those as well. And then that allows us, just like a Management Reporter and FRX, to create virtual roll-ups that don't exist in BC. So if you want to see a couple of different companies together to create a certain region or any other way that you may categorize your data, you can get these roll-ups that actually don't exist in BC, but they do from a reporting standpoint. Another function that allows for is I've run this report based on a tree, and there's multiple companies that are part of this tree. So natively, Solver allows you to automatically create a separate worksheet per node of the tree. So if you're working with MEM and you got 30 different MEM entities that make up a tree that you're creating, it will give you an individual worksheet per node of that tree. So we've got the consolidated node, which is all companies, and then anything else that's in the tree will be individual tabs. So we can create essentially a multi-report workbook from one single report. I also want to open this up in edit mode because I want to kind of hammer home that concept with how these multiple sheets work in a single workbook. So I'm going to go ahead and open this in edit mode, which will launch Excel. So you can see that this is a large report with lots of different tabs. This is the report design of what we just looked at. You can see that there's only there's 1, 2 actual report components. The rest of it is formulas. And you'll notice that it's only 1 tab in the design mode. What essentially happens, and you can run reports directly in Excel too. So if you have the right license, which is called a power user or a full end user, you can open up reports in design mode and you have the ability to run them in Excel as well. You can run them, which is just going to generate the report, or you can publish it, and publishing just creates a static Excel file. I'm going to go ahead and run this. So again, very, very small report design, but we get a very large report as a result. And it's bringing a lot of data. It's coming in from lots of different companies. So you see we have multiple tabs in this case. For this one, I just ran it for Western Hemisphere, which is just 2 entities, and then a virtual roll-up of that. But you can see that it created a multi-tab report from one worksheet. And if I wanted to rerun this for the entire consolidation tree or a different region of that tree, I'd get the same functionality. So consolidation is fully capable within Solver, as well as like if one of your companies is, say, an elimination company, for example, it fully supports that as well. And you can do consolidated any type of report, P&Ls, balance sheets, trial balances, and things like that. I don't think you guys need it, but it does support multiple currencies, which I'm not really going to get into right now. The next thing it supports is allocations. If you're heavy on allocations, whether it's based on units or customers or square feet or employees, depending on the complexity of your allocation process, oftentimes that is handled natively in just Excel workbooks, and then we get the journal entries from there. Solver has the ability to actually deploy a full allocations module, which will automatically calculate all of those allocations. So we can handle it also when we mix budgeting into the mix. For example, we could use a budget form, and the yellow are things where you would key them in to put in, say, square feet per, in this case, per department. And you can see that's for each company. So I've got my Asia company, my Canada company, my FMEA company, and so I'm capturing square feet on this particular example. I can also do it based on head count. In this case, this is set up for input, but so whatever drivers I'm using for my allocation, I can use a budget form to enter those in, and I can also import them in from Excel as well. And so once they're in the data warehouse, then it's fully reportable. So if I want to then look at, say, a calculation report, and I'm going to go ahead and open that one up. That was, well, either one of these will be fine. We can take anything that's an account level or really any dimension and simply create an Excel file that's going to do the math to allocate out things either to departments or to companies or locations or whatever. So this would be a simplistic view, but like I said, we can also roll out full-blown allocation modules if you have complex needs for that. That's fully supported. analytics. So I do want to briefly show a couple of these just to kind of show you some of the things that you can do once you go to Excel-based reporting, because it opens up a lot of capabilities. For example, here, we call it kind of a poor man's Power BI dashboard, but this is a cash flow tree. And I mentioned that we're integrating general ledger, but we can also integrate other modules as well. So we've got this cash flow analysis. It's just standard Excel charts. We look at our inputs of cash from our revenues, and then our outflows, our cost of sales, our expenses. We can look at our accounts payable, what's going out there, what's coming in, what we expect to come in from accounts receivable. We could also do the same thing with sales orders and purchase orders if we want to get it even more complex. But essentially, this is just a simple charts that are showing our different sources and uses of cash. What is the foundation of this? This is a multi-tab, multi-module report. So you're not restricted. Like a management report or an FRX, you can only report on general ledger data. But here we're not restricted by that. The foundation of all of this is we've got a trending P&L, and this is fairly standard, similar to what I've already showed you. This just happens to be a trending one. And then we've got a trending balance sheet, similar to the balance sheet I showed you, but in this case, it's a trending. And when I say that similar to, you'll find that this works very similar to what you're used to in Management Reporter and FRX, where from top down, where you would normally create a row format, and then you'd look at it differently from left to right using your column layouts. This works the exact same way. You'll build a foundation of the report from top to bottom, and then you can very quickly make versions of it with different columns from left to right. And we got our trending statement of cash flows. And then we're bringing in sales. If we were to bring in a AR module, we could bring in sales information. This one also has some graphs on it, and it's broken down by our customer and the different types of, in this case, products that they have or revenue sources. Then we've got our AR, what we expect to bring in, from our customers or receivables. It does support hyperlinks because BC is, all web-based, obviously. So we have the ability to produce, like in this case, just a HTML for AR, and be able to use hyperlinks to take us directly to that screen in BC or any other system that you may have. So if you have document management, we could link directly to the invoice. And then finally, AP. So I show this report because it's a multi-module, multi-tab report that we're using to do further analytics, in this case, based on cash flow. Okay. Another report that I like to show, and this wouldn't be something that is common, but I show it because it demonstrates the power of, when you go to Excel-based reporting, some of the possibilities that it opens up. So this is kind of like a newsletter format of a report, or some people call it a flash report. So just some highlights for this month's financial statements. The profitability for this month was great. Okay, what defines great? Here's what our net profits were, this period. Here's what they were last period, and this represents an improvement. Okay, what means improvement? So the foundation of this simple newsletter type of a format is just a P&L variance. So we've got all of our data here, where we're looking at actual versus budget. We're looking at this year. We're looking at a prior year, and looking at the variances for each of those. Essentially what this is if I scroll down to the bottom here, normally this section would be hidden. It's just a bunch of business rules. We're saying what are the components that we're looking at, and then we're adding verbiage. What is the range that says it's great? What's the range that says it needs improvement? What's a range that says it's strong or weak? And so these are just a series of Excel formulas and lookups that are creating like this business rule section, so that it can create this auto narrative or this newsletter type thing. Again, that's something that you couldn't do in any other type of reporting tool, but when you introduce Excel into the mix and you have the ability to create these business rules as well as verbiage that does lookups within text, you can create pretty cool cover letters or newsletter style reports. Finally, you can also do things like, certainly you can do all kinds of KPIs, you can do ratios and things like that. Excel is very strong on statistical components within Excel, and even with some of the statistical add-ins, which allows you to do complex statistical analysis, that's all fully supported. And so, here's an example of just a fairly, just a one-page predictive trend analysis. So it's looking trending. So the foundation of this is a P&L trending report, similar to what we've already looked at. And it just gives us the ability to, graphically look at what's going on with our different types of revenues, and then use statistics to predict where it's going over the next 12 months. And, again, you can use standard statistical stuff, and you can change the weighting, or, you can change the adjustment factors and things like that. But again, that's kind of what Excel opens up, that possibility to very quickly analyze and statistically help you predict where you're going a little better, as opposed to just trending. Okay, so everything that I just showed you from a reporting standpoint, that is all what's called report templates or live reporting. Notice that every report I opened up, I could open the report, I could change the parameters, what company, what date, what department, and I could run that report. And so that's called either live reporting or from a functional standpoint up here, it's called report templates. And so those are for end user licenses that are part of the Solver subscription. We also have another reporting tool called Archive Reports. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but essentially Archive Reports it's a lower cost license. And essentially all it is somebody else on your team would generate the reports and send them to users' archives. And so an archive user has the ability to basically just look at this report. They still have full drill down capabilities. They have the ability to export it to Excel, so they can save it as their own file. But essentially, it's a static report with the exception of the drill down. So they're not selecting what company they're running it for. They're not selecting a date. That's being done for them. And this is a lower cost license for people who don't need to be running their own reports. And then there's a tool, an available module for that called Publisher. And I'm not going to get a lot into Publisher, but essentially what Publisher is a report subscription. So essentially, let's say I'm putting together a board packet or an executive packet. So I would simply select all of the reports that I want to be part of that packet, and then Publisher will automatically generate those reports and then distribute them. And they can be distributed to users' email accounts. So they'll get an email with the report inside of it as an Excel attachment, or we can send it to their archive. And so for users that consume reports via the web and their archive, we can have it automatically generate and distribute those based on a schedule. Okay, so that's an overview of reporting. All right, so now we'll get into budgeting. And I think that budgeting is where we realize even more power of Solver, because again, in the past with ERPs like GP, we're really restricted to just either hand keying in or importing in the annual budget. It's just at the general ledger level. When we go to a full-blown budgeting tool, it opens up so many more possibilities, and it takes away the traditional budgeting cycle of creating these templates and sending them out, and you lose visibility to it until you get them back, and you don't really have the ability to control the process. And typically, we're doing budgeting more like a P&L style of format. So once we go to a full-blown budgeting tool, we have the ability to really control the process and create content based on what people actually need. Again, I mentioned this organization process. So we have these categories out here just as we did with reporting. And so I'm going to just open up a couple of these. Budget process review or process overview, similar to the one I already showed you. It's just a static sheet that has the schedule. And then we might start out with the prep stuff, the stuff that the budget manager might do. Maybe we start out with what we call global assumptions. So we're starting the budgeting cycle. What are our FICA seed and suitor rates this year? What's our workers' comp rate this year? I don't need everybody else to see those. I can just capture those at the beginning of the year. And it could be all kinds of things. It could be benefits. In this case, just simple, per month benefit, but you could break it out by plan or by whether they're family or individual. And then, maybe what my days per month are for this year or any other things that you're tracking. So this would be a global input form that applies to everything. In budgeting, we typically will highlight in yellow the actual input amount. If I am the budget manager and, FICA is, 7.15%, I simply type it in, hit the Save Data button, and it will write that back to the data warehouse. This would be something that kind of starts the process. All right, next, I also point out that you are not limited to general ledger budgeting. For example, if you want to capture things, and this is, a fairly simplistic example, but, we want to capture strategies. What are our corporate purpose? What are our values and strengths? To be able to capture this stuff, you can use this data in reports, but it also centralizes it instead of keeping it in a Word document or Excel spreadsheet, part of our reporting solution. Maybe we've got some goals for the year, or we want to, attain a certain gross profit, or we want to get to a certain net income level, or obtain a certain number of customers. This allows us to, quickly capture those goals for the year, and then we can report against them. How are we doing against the goals that we set at the beginning of the year? This is something that we can't really put into an ERP because an ERP, it's got to be at an account level as opposed to, in this case, just a global level. Another thing we can do is very quickly create a budget just to start the process. What we've essentially done here is we've got, I've run this for September. We've got a 12 months worth or 9 months worth of actuals. I'm going to show you how we can forecast out the remaining 3 months in just a few minutes. But for example, from a breakback standpoint, we say, okay, what do we want our net income to be? And then allow Excel to automatically calculate this and create a very quick and dirty budget for the next year. And again, it's just using standard Excel formulas, taking the revenue line and comparing it to last year's net income as a percent of net income, and just using simple math to calculate those. And it does that for every single line. So this is a tool that gives us a way to very quickly create like a baseline budget before we even start the process. Gives you kind of a reasonability check as you're going through the budgeting cycle. All right, then we get into more of getting that forecast in. So I just mentioned we're running this for 9 months. I'm missing 3 months of data. Again, I can say, well, I need to get a forecast out here. So I've got this a budget scenario, but I can also do forecast scenarios and just to budget out the remaining 3 months. I could use last year's budget or any revisions of that budget or any time that I've reforecasted it, but this is a tool that can actually be done every month or once a quarter, or budget variances kind of get out of whack. You can say, well, I better reforecast this. And so this is just a simple input form at the account level. So I'm running this for one company. This would be your multi-entity company or entity. I'm running it for a specific department, and I just have 3 columns in this case of input to be able to, forecast out the rest of this year based on, what I know today. Then we can get into kind of the full budgeting process. Now, one of the things that I really love about having a tool like this, companies do a pretty good job of budgeting, but oftentimes they don't look back and say, how good are we at budgeting? And so this is actually just a report that only looks at variances. So it's looking at our variances to budget, in this case, over 3 years. And you can see that it's broken down by department. So I ran this for a single company, all departments within this company. It's using data grouping, both top to bottom as far and left to right. If I want to, focus in on administration, for example, I just expand this, and then it's by account number. So it's just looking at the variances for the year for each of these accounts for each of these years. And it also has the the data grouping from left to right. So if I want to look up what makes up 2019, I just hit the plus button, and then I can see what is my actual, or what's my budget, and what's that variance. And so again, just a report that really focuses on those variances to say, how good of a job am I doing at budgeting? And we're using conditional formatting to kind of rank them. Another thing that we might do is a personnel budget. You can deploy a human resources module within Solver without actually having it integrate with your payroll system. So once a year, depending on what your budget life cycle is, we import in our employees and their salaries for the year, again, by entity, by department. And so this looks like a lot. If I scroll from left to right, there's a lot of stuff going on in here, and there's a lot of stuff going on from top to bottom. This is a multi-department report. So I've got my administration, I scroll down, I got finance and accounting, scroll down, I've got sales and marketing. So it looks like there's a lot going on here, but it's really not that much. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm looking at my existing employees. So if I'm looking at the administration department, anything in yellow I can key in changes to it. So I could change their title for the year, for example. If I know they're going to get an increase, is it a % increase or is it a dollar increase, and when are they going to get their increases? If I'm adding a new employee, for example, let's say I'm going to add an assistant controller. So I know I'm going to hire one this year. Okay, when am I going to hire them? Let's say I'll hire this person in March. And then how many hours are they going to work? And I put in a salary. So nothing's happened yet, but as soon as I put in a salary, you'll see that the math starts happening in Excel. So essentially, we're controlling, and then another one might be my benefits eligible, yes or no. And so essentially, I've got just a handful of input, and we can modify this. Oftentimes, we'll use this form to create HR budgets and just tweak it based on your needs. A lot of times, wherever possible, we try not to reinvent the wheel. And we've got a lot of these great forms already built, so oftentimes we like to use them. But this is the only input section here in the yellow. The rest of it is just Excel formulas. It's calculating our salary, right, based on the number of hours. And remember, in the assumptions, I calculated the days per month. So that's feeding that. Then I get my total compensation. Keeps going. I've got my taxable income. There's those FICA and FUTA and SUTA rates that are coming over from that assumptions form. And again, this is just Excel formulas. There's my FUTA rates. Keep going. There's my workers' comp. There's my benefits. And then finally, I'm actually using it to count the head count as well. So that's what this last one is just counting how many employees per period. So that's all just Excel formulas. And when I scroll down, the purpose of this is really to do a general ledger budget. And so, I'm adding up my salaries for the month, each individual month. I'm adding up my FICA, FUTA, SUTA, workers' comp, and benefit costs per month. And so this is a multi-module budget form. So it's writing back to the HR module, but ultimately at the end of the day, what we want to do is calculate the general ledger amounts. And that's what this is doing. So this is writing both to the HR module as well as to the general ledger module. So I can really improve our payroll budgeting process. Another one would be the typical sales, for example. I don't have to, as we've done in the past, have something in P&L format so that I can import it into GP. Again, this report is by entity. I'm running it for a specific salesperson. I'm running it for maybe certain customers or certain products. I can send this out to my sales team and say, I could control the process of what the dollar amounts are going to be, for example. I don't have to, but I certainly could. And I'll say, just tell me the quantities that you're going to sell every single month, and let Excel do the computations on that and write back my estimated revenues for the year and total them up. Again, I have the ability to just create forms based on just one certain set of data that I need, not the entirety of my budget data. And then one of the biggest ones would be things like other expenses. So again, I'm running this for a specific entity, for a specific department. I've got my actual data. I've run this through September. So I've got my actual data through September. But remember, I mentioned that forecast data that would be another scenario, a budget scenario. So I can get a full 12 months to help that budgeting process. And I'm saying, what budget do I want and what forecast do I want? So the budget is where it's writing to. The forecast is just what's going to give me my 12 months of data. Here, if I'm a budget user, I can simply go in here and start just typing in values if I have that information. However I compute these numbers, I can type them in, but I also have the ability to do line item details. So let's say, for example, I'm looking at consulting. If I hit this button down here called spreading and line item details, this gives me the ability to do a schedule. And so let's say if I'm estimating what consulting costs are going to be for the year, and I know I've got this schedule of things that are coming up that I'm going to have to pay for this year for consulting, I can capture those in individual lines. And these also get written back with the budget, and they're fully reportable. So it gives you the ability to generate a report that says, here's everything that I captured for in total, but here's how those numbers are computed by having the schedule associated with it. So that's a huge feature. And every line, I've got the ability to add comments to. I also have the ability to do spreading. And so I can say, this is actually a really cool feature. I can put in a set dollar amount and have it spread evenly, or I can have it do the math and spread it the way that this account was spread in historical years. Or I could say something like, well, just bring in whatever I did last year in 2021 and add 5% to it. And then that will pre-populate this, and then I can go and override those if I know that I've got individual, things that I need to do for a specific month. Budgeting can also happen here in the web as I'm showing you, but we can also do it directly in Excel as well. Another thing that we can do is we can budget on any module, but I did want to bring up this budget review with comment. I showed you that one sheet where it had the actual versus variance with variance comments. This is where we capture those. So I can send this out as a budget form to maybe my departmental or company managers and say, explain these variances. And again, I could use conditional formatting. I could highlight the variances based on a certain dollar amount or a certain percentage, but I can have them enter in comments to explain those. And then, as I said, and as I showed you in that other report, they're fully reportable. So again, all the yellow boxes here are where the managers would key in those explanations for the variances. The last thing I'll mention about budgeting is it does have a full-blown workflow. I'm not going to go through the process of the workflow, but essentially what it does is I select the different budget forms. I can have individual subscriptions. So maybe I've got one to capture revenues. Maybe I've got one to capture personnel. And basically what we're doing is we're saying what budget forms are going to be part of that workflow. What's the date range for them to be able to do it? Who is my reviewer? Who is my approver? And then I can either key in the parameters, what month, what department, things like that, or I can let the user decide which one, give them control over selecting that. And so it's a routing system. When I get done inputting my portion of the budget, I can route it to the next person in the line for approval. And I can also, as a budget manager, I can see the status. I can see all my budget forms out here. This is stuff that hasn't been started yet. I would see things that are in process. I would see things that are ready for review, see things that are ready to be approved, and see things that are ready to be completed. So I show that to demonstrate that we do have full-blown routing and workflow capabilities with budgeting as well. And then the last part about budgeting is the input flow. And basically what input flow is, and I'll just open one up in edit mode, is we can link budget forms together. So we talked about those assumptions, FICA and FIDA rates. Well, those values feed the personnel budget, and those values might feed a different budget. And so it gives us the ability to link budget forms together so that we know that when there are certain values that have to be done in a certain order, and we can't complete one budget until we have the numbers from another one. And that's what this input flow does, is it allows us to join them together and make sure that we get all of the components that we need. Okay, really quick too, I'm going to switch over to the data warehouse, and I just want to show you kind of what this looks like, just so it can be a little bit overwhelming when people think of data warehouses. So essentially, all the data warehouse is doing, I'll show you general ledger summary, and this is simply the summary level general ledger data that is going to show what account number it is, what department, any of my dimensions or entities in BC. This would be our MEM entity number. And then it's just got our period, our scenario, which in this case is actual. There's budget data out here would see budget, and then the monthly summary amount. So that's basically from a transactional standpoint, there's really not a lot behind the scenes. If I were to look at the details, I would see it at the journal entry level, and I would see both sides of each entry with debits and the credits. Also, this is where we control things like our trees. If I look at the entity dimension, these would be all of your MEM entities that come over from BC, but I can also use this to create trees. So how do things roll up together? In this case, just a simple geographical tree. And so I'm selecting which MEM entities makes up each of these nodes. The data warehouse itself, oftentimes it seems complex, but it's actually pretty straightforward. It's modular, and it's either dimensions or it's transactions. I also want to point out that we have Solver Academy. So Solver Academy is a learning portal within Solver. It has learning paths. You can do certification paths. You can learn reporting. You can learn budgeting. You can also learn Power BI. You can get subscriptions to this academy and tons of videos, tons of work papers and worksheets on pretty much anything that you need to do in Solver. It also has a support portal as well as a community. Oftentimes in the community, you can ask a question out there, and other Solver users around the world can respond to questions that you may have, or even just ideas. How do you handle a certain situation? We also have the template marketplace. So all of those reports that I showed you, a lot of them are included out of the box, but there are hundreds and hundreds of more templates that are out there as part of the Solver showcase. And what I like about these is that if you have a very specific way that you need to have your financial statements or your budget forms done, then certainly we'll make those exactly as you need them. But if you have flexibility or you want ideas on how certain things were built, we've got this marketplace out there where you can grab pre-built reports, and a lot of them already come with it. And what we find is that one of the best ways that we found to learn these is to not only go through training, but to open up stuff that's already been built and say, okay, how did they do that? Just kind of reverse engineer it. It's just Excel. So these are exceptional learning tools just to be able to look at things that have already been built. And then finally, just to kind of close things out, Solver is fully compatible with Power BI. The data comes from BC. It then gets loaded into the data warehouse. We use Solver Excel-based reporting for our reporting, but we can also link it to Power BI all on the Microsoft platform and be able to do full-blown dashboards. And the data set of all of this data and these are all coming from the data warehouse. Power BI is part of your Office 365 subscription. You do have to have a pro license, but there is a connector in both BC to do Power BI dashboards directly from BC, or there's a connector, or there's a connector in Solver to be able to do dashboards directly from the Solver data warehouse. That was basically it for my portion of things.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone.
Bye.